In April 1865, the American Civil War was finally coming to an end. After 4 long and brutal years, the Union had achieved victory over the Confederate forces. The President of the United States, Abraham Lincoln, had led the nation through one of the most difficult periods in its history. Millions of Americans had been affected by the war, and the country was preparing to begin the long process of rebuilding. Lincoln believed the nation needed healing, unity, and reconciliation between North and South. On April 14, 1865, just days after the war effectively ended, the president decided to attend a play at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. What should have been a peaceful evening would soon become one of the most tragic moments in American history. On the evening of April 14, 1865, President Abraham Lincoln arrived at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. He was there to watch a popular comedy play called Our American Cousin. Lincoln was accompanied by his wife, Mary Todd Lincoln, along with 2 guests. The theater was full that night, and when the audience realized the president was present, many people stood up and applauded. Lincoln smiled and bowed politely from the presidential box above the stage. After months of war and stress, the evening was meant to be a moment of relaxation. But inside the same building, someone else had already entered with a very different plan. His name was John Wilkes Booth, and he was about to carry out a shocking attack. The man behind the plot was John Wilkes Booth. Booth was a well-known actor who had performed many times at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. But he was also a strong supporter of the Confederate cause during the American Civil War. After the Confederacy's defeat, Booth became furious and believed that President Abraham Lincoln was responsible for the South's downfall. Determined to take revenge, he created a dangerous plan. Booth and a small group of conspirators intended to assassinate several important leaders of the United States government on the same night. Their goal was to create chaos and destabilize the government. While his partners targeted other officials, Booth chose to attack the president himself. And on that night in April 1865, he quietly moves through the theater, waiting for the perfect moment. On the night of April 14, 1865, the play continued inside Ford's Theater while the audience laughed at the comedy on stage. Meanwhile, John Wilkes Booth quietly moved through the theater toward the presidential box. Because Booth was a well-known actor there, no one suspected anything unusual. Inside the box sat Abraham Lincoln, watching the performance with his wife, Mary Todd Lincoln. Booth waited for a moment when the audience burst into loud laughter at a joke in the play. Then he stepped into the presidential box and raised a small pistol. At point-blank range, he fired a single shot at the president. The bullet struck Lincoln in the back of the head. In just seconds, a peaceful evening had turned into one of the most shocking moments in American history. After firing the shot, John Wilkes Booth quickly jumped from the presidential box onto the stage of Ford's Theater. As he landed, he reportedly shouted the phrase Sic semper tyrannis, a Latin expression meaning thus always to tyrants. The audience was confused at first, thinking it might be part of the play. But within moments, people realized something terrible had happened. Inside the box, Abraham Lincoln sat critically wounded. Panic quickly spread throughout the theater. Doctors and the audience rushed to the presidential box to try to help the president. Meanwhile, Booth escaped through the back of the theater and disappeared into the dark streets of Washington, D.C. The hunt for the assassin had begun. After the attack at Ford's Theater, authorities immediately launched a massive manhunt. The assassin, John Wilkes Booth, had already escaped from Washington, D.C. on horseback. Booth fled south, hoping to reach areas where supporters of the former Confederacy might help him hide. Meanwhile, soldiers and detectives spread across the countryside searching for clues. The assassination of Abraham Lincoln shocked the entire nation, and the government was determined to capture those responsible. Posters with Booth's name and description were quickly distributed everywhere. The search lasted for days as authorities followed every possible lead. But eventually, the trail of the assassin would lead them to a farm in Virginia. The death of Abraham Lincoln deeply shocked the nation. Just days earlier, the American Civil War had effectively come to an end. Many Americans saw Lincoln as the leader who preserved the United States during its most dangerous crisis. He also played a key role in ending slavery through measures like the Emancipation Proclamation. After his death, millions of people across the country mourned the loss of their president. Lincoln's funeral train traveled through several cities so citizens could pay their respects. Today, he is remembered as one of the most important leaders in American history. The tragic events at Ford's Theater ensured that his legacy would never be forgotten. The assassination of Abraham Lincoln on April 14, 1865, remains one of the most tragic events in the history of the United States. Just days after the end of the American Civil War, the nation lost the leader who had guided it through its darkest years. The attack at Ford's Theater shocked the country and left millions of Americans in mourning. The assassin, John Wilkes Booth, believed he could change history with a single act of violence. Instead, the tragedy strengthened Lincoln's place as one of the most respected leaders in American history. Today, His leadership during the Civil War and his commitment to preserving the Union continue to shape the legacy of the United States. More than a century later, the story of that night in Washington remains a powerful reminder of how a single moment can change the course of history.